cards, index cards, write your questions on it, bring it over to me or over to Pastor Scott. We'll read those questions. However, if you feel compelled to ask your own question, let me just ask you, Sister Laura, let me just ask you to come up and ask your question. We don't need the context of your question, just ask your question directly. And if one of the panel members need more context, then they will ask for it. So we have about maybe an hour. So the mics are open, and we have the cards coming forward as well. If you need a card, make sure you raise your hand, please. Yes, sir, you have a question? Okay. We have our first question over here, and Pastor Scott and I will trade mics. If you just state your name and ask your question.
My name is Merle Johnson, and I'm a candidate for the state school board, so my question is going to relate to students. This is for the chief, okay? You talked about when the policeman pulls over a car, that the policeman has a right to ask the occupant to get out of the vehicle for no reason at all, just to get out of the vehicle. And the reason I'm asking that is because the way things are going now with the killing of African American males, there is a fear that if the person gets out of the car, that they may be harmed or killed. So how does a police officer deal with that fear and not see it as defiance?
The best I can answer you is you want to comply with the officer, but the officer, it's going to depend on the situation and why he stopped in the car and what's going on, whether he wants those people out of the car. Most times he won't, because basically you have better control of what's going on if everybody's in the car rather than out. And so usually if you're going to have him get out of the car, it's going to be for a specific reason. Now, if he walks up talking to the driver and he sees open cans of beer in the car, or he sees a marijuana roach in the ashtray, well then he may wait for another car to get there, tell the people to get out, because now he has a right to search the car. And that's what he's going to do. Usually he's going to explain to him what he's doing. Okay, you need to come out and you need to search the car, stand over here on the side. But to become, as I mentioned before, when your initial contact with the police and during that thing is not the time to debate issues there. Just complying, and if there's an issue with it, you deal with it afterwards. If there's an issue with whether you got a ticket or not, that's what the court and the prosecutors handle. If there's an issue with the officer's behavior, and then you come to the police station, you file a complaint, and we look at it.
Just a question over here. How is the public defender's office funded, and is it adequate in Lake County? Seemingly there is not enough defenders for the needs of the indigent. That's the question.
Well, to my knowledge, the state public defender, the office of the state public defender in Columbus, through the budget process in Columbus, indirectly funds the Lake County Public Defender's Office. The public defenders are required to keep track of their time. The time they spend is then submitted to their office, which then goes to Columbus, and that's part of the funding mechanism. Now, you're correct that there are not necessarily enough public defenders to represent all the indigent defendants, because the defendants have to file a affidavit of indigency, and then the appointed public defender, Chuck Greasehammer, has to make the determination that they are indigent, then they are entitled to the representation. Many times there are two defendants involved in one crime that's alleged, and the public defender cannot represent both of them because they may have adverse interests to each other. So a private lawyer is then appointed to represent that person at an hourly rate, which is currently $40 an hour if it's out of court time, $50 if it's in court time. But the bulk of the money that funds that office comes indirectly out of Columbus.
Next question is about the juror. How are jurors selected and from what area of the county? And do the same juror selected, are they selected more than once? Are they selected by race, or are they pulled randomly? And is a list kept of who served on the jury?
Jurors in Lake County are selected at random by a computer. If you're a registered voter in Lake County, you are in that large group of names that the computer is going to select at random. So that's how the voters are picked in Lake County, registered voters at random. There is no other determination. Race is never involved. It's just if the computer spits out the name, then you are selected in the large group, that is, in the large panel that can ultimately become a member. You can then become a member of a small jury or a grand jury. For instance, I don't know what the numbers are, maybe you do, Judge, but in a year, hundreds of names are given, are picked. Each judge gets a certain amount of those. Then when you're going to have a trial, you will have a voir dire of a panel of about 40 people, and from that, jurors will be selected from questions of the lawyers. But to get into that panel, it's strictly the random by the computer. Once you're in the questions in the panel, whether or not you're going to be selected for the panel depends upon if you can be a fair and impartial juror in that case. For instance, if you know one of the parties to the case, if you are friends with the defendant, or if you don't believe that the crime the person is charged with, even though the law states that is a crime and your personal beliefs, then that would disqualify you from being a fair and impartial juror. In that case, you might be in some other case. How often can you serve? You can be selected, and some people are selected multiple times. Some people are only never selected. The law says that if you serve on a jury or a grand jury, then you cannot be forced to serve on a jury again for at least 1 year. So you do have you can't be forced more than once a year if you don't want to.
And just to add to that, just so you have a sense, because a lot of people say, I've never been selected ever to serve on a jury. My neighbor's been there twice in X number of years. Each general division, at the draw that takes place each November, each general division judge gets assigned 2,500 jurors for potential trial juries. So out of that 2,500, a vast majority of them won't ever get called that are even in that group. So but it's done every year.
It's a question for law
Can I
enforcement.
make one more? Outside, if you're not a registered voter, outside is the Board of Elections representative, the Deputy Director Board of Elections. He has a registration form, so you can register to vote tonight if you want to. So if you're not a registered voter and you're 18 years of age or older, or you're going to be 18 during the election, please go register.
A law enforcement question. There's really two questions kind of getting at the same subject here, but if pulled over in Menor while driving, is it okay to reach into the glove compartment to get registration insurance card before the officer approaches the car? Does that look suspicious? And I think the other question kind of gets at the same idea.
Yeah, it looks suspicious. You know what? If you get stopped, wait for instructions. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. If your wallet's in there, when an officer asks for your driver's license, say, my wallet's in the glove box. All right, to go get it, that's all you have to do.
We have a live question on this side of the room.
My name is Marcita, and my question is for Judge Trebitz. Although we have like the new NeoCap and Beacon Health and other like residential and non-residential programs, it's kind of a two-part. Do you think there's a limited amount of facilities and programs for our community? And is there going to be some expansion and additional programs and facilities, given that we have one? I think that we'll be doing well.
Thank you. I think that's a very good question. Working in this field with addiction and also mental health, I think it's very important, and what we need, frankly, is more beds to try to help people. If somebody who is not stable, I think it's very important that we have that, and we do not have that kind of facility now. So a stabilization type thing, I think, would be very important. that's a weakness that we have, and I think we need to do that. With that being said, it should be known that Commissioner Moran has done a wonderful job. We had a facility that was a limited facility for OBI cases that was being used for something totally different, and then they opened that up again, so we had beds for women, so that they would have beds for that. As a municipal judge, people are saying, Judge, why are you an advocate for that? Because it's really not helping you at all. This is for felony courts, because it was for NeoCap and those kind of things. But what it does is it trickles down, because what that did for us, it opened up our jail treatment program that Sheriff Dunlop has, and that's very good because it gives us the opportunity to try to help the people on that end. So, thank you.
A legal question about expungement. Is there an application form? Is there a fee? Do you have to have an attorney? And can you get help from a public defender, as Cuyahoga County does?
I can take this one since I feel like I do this all the time. Most municipal courts have their own form online. I know in Metro that a form that if you go up to the clerk's office, they'll give you the form to fill out. I believe the filing fee is $75. You do not need an attorney to do that. It's a simple form of filling in the offense that you were convicted of, and putting your case number and your name and that type of a thing on there. And you can have an attorney. Obviously, having an advocate helps too, but you do not need one. That form then goes down to the probation department where that person's criminal history is run, because it simply comes down basically to whether or not they're eligible, first of all, to file the application. And then there might be some other factors that go into it. But probation looks at the criminal history to see if they're eligible or not. It also comes up to the prosecutor's office, and we double check those things, and that person gets to go in front of the judge for a hearing. And if there is some basis to object, certain offenses are not expungible. Some people don't realize that they have more than the crimes permitted to file an expungement, so there can be some objections that get filed, and those things ultimately go before the judge for a hearing.
The other thing is we do have discretion if a person wants to file and doesn't have the money. They could file an affidavit and indigency, and we could waive that fee. We do that, of course.
Hi, my name is Ellen. And going off of the jury topic, not too long ago there was a mistrial of jury misconduct that the News Herald ran a story about. And I wondered if there was anyone on the panel that could speak to their experience with the jury pools, their faith in sort of the understanding they may have and the preparation they may have to handle some of the complexities that come before them. Thank you.
And you're talking about from the juror aspect of things? Most cases that come to a jury trial are criminal cases. There are occasional civil cases that come, but most of those are rather simple in nature, a car accident, things like that, a workers' compensation case. Occasionally you're going to get cases that involve medical malpractice, financial malpractice, things of that nature. Those get a little bit more complicated, but I found that, ironically, when the 70 jurors, potential jurors that I call in at the beginning of jury selection, they're all sitting out there, and Deacon Jones knows this, they're all sitting out there trying to figure a way that they can get out of jury duty because they don't want to sit there for 3 days because they're not able to work, or they have other obligations. But I have found that they are, during that process, which can be a little dry, that they're very attentive and very interested. And the farther it goes along, an hour into it, they're more interested. 2 hours, as it goes along, they're interested. And one of the first things I tell them when they come in is, I know a lot of you are sitting out here and you don't want to serve, but I guarantee you, if you deliberate on this jury, when you come back, the first thing you're going to ask me when I talk to you afterward is, I'd like to come back again. So I find that while the lawyers may think that what they're presenting is too complicated for the regular juror, I think they're wrong, and I think the jurors generally do. They're very perceptive, and they a lot more times than not get it right.
With the increased growth in the Hispanic and Latino community in Lake County, what programs are being put in place to help this growing population for both undocumented and citizen populations?
Can you repeat the last part of that question?
Yeah, it's what programs are being put in place to help with the growing population, Hispanic, Latino, for both the undocumented and citizen populations?
I can tell you about the prosecutor's office. I mentioned the Victims Advocacy Program earlier. We have a Spanish-speaking victim advocate. So if we have victims who are of Hispanic descent and speak Spanish, we can communicate with them. We can give them the same services that we give to every other victim. I don't know of any other programs that are out there in the criminal justice system when you're talking about documented or undocumented, but I can tell you this, if there's a felony that has been committed against an individual, and if that victim is documented or not documented, it doesn't affect our prosecution. We are going to prosecute the perpetrator. Hopefully that answers the question, at least as far as the prosecutor's office goes.
If I may, it should be noted that the Supreme Court of Ohio is very proactive in this situation with foreign language interpreters. Matter of fact, they have provided us with bench cards so that we know what kind of questions to ask, what kind of questions to ask the interpreters to make sure that they're certified and they're able to help the person. And especially in my cases, I think it's darn important that when you have felonies and people are looking at going to prison for many, many years, it's essential. And I can assure you that the Supreme Court of Ohio is on it. The last 2 or 3 seminars I've gone to, they've had programs concerning interpreters and supporters.
We also have, when somebody comes in for a plea in the municipal court, as well as in the common pleas court, just to ensure that the person does in fact understand their rights and understand what they're doing, the severity of what they're doing. There's usually a form that goes along with that that specifically outlines to understand you're waiving your right to have a trial, and you may be subject to sentencing of the court and be put on probation, and you understand these things. And the court also does have those forms in different languages as well, just to make sure that everybody understands exactly what's going on before they come to court.
Okay, Chief Knight, I have my CCW and I may be packing. I just went through Mentor and someone pulled me over. Can you explain what CCW is and what's the process when the officer pulls over someone with a CCW license or certification?
If a CCW is concealed carry weapon, it's a permit to carry a concealed weapon in the state of Ohio. They're issued by sheriff's departments. You don't have to go to your county sheriff's department. You can go to any sheriff's department, get one issued and apply for one. Law states that if you have a CCW permit and you are stopped by the police, it is your responsibility to notify the officer when he comes up to your car that you have a CCW permit and whether or not you have a gun in the car or not. Many times the officer may know that if he's running the plate ahead of time, if the plate and the owner are the same person, because those are entered into leads. So went by the sheriff's department when those are issued. So if your information is run, it comes up that you do have a CCW permit.
Chief Knight, you're on the hot seat again over here. What is your position on body cameras for law enforcement?
There's a lot to be seen with those yet. I'm not against them. We're doing a lot of research on them. As a matter of fact, I'm going to the International Chiefs Conference later next month, and I just signed up for about 5 different seminars dealing with them. The issue of the cameras themselves are not the big thing. It's all the logistics that go with it, getting a correct policy to go with it. and all the storage and retention and stuff, which is extremely costly, and so you have to be able to finance that. But one of the things with cameras, and we have cameras in the cars now, and Prosecutor Colson mentioned discovery and stuff, and then there's public records laws too, and there's always, you hear stuff, why isn't this video being released or not, and maybe you can address the discovery issue on that too, and why sometimes these aren't being released.
It's hard to answer that question without the specifics. Quite frankly, I'm a person that feels that if you're going to err on making it public. The more transparent you are, the more faith they have in the criminal justice system. So there might be some video that you wouldn't want to make public because of what it will do to the victims, seeing maybe a loved one who is hurt. But for the most part, ultimately, it's all going to become public record sooner or later. So my feeling is, the quicker you get it out, the more open you look, and the better it is. So that's my position. But I'm trying to. Every case is different. No two cases are exactly the same, and so you have to look at the facts of each case. And the one problem with the videos, body camera videos, besides what the chief said, and what the chief was referring to, and I don't think he specifically said, is you have to make sure that they can't be manipulated or erased. And so you have to have some procedure where it's going to show what really occurred without somebody manipulating it. But the second thing is, when you're looking with your eyes, you're turning your head, you have a big field of vision. Body cameras don't have usually as large a field of vision, and they're usually looking where the body's looking, not necessarily where the head's looking. So body cameras don't show everything, but they can be very helpful in some cases.
So, some of the issues that, we have to deal with before we incorporate these things is, unlike a camera in a car, you're not going into people's homes. You're going to be dealing with juveniles. You're going to be dealing with victims of sex crimes. And where do you draw the line there? And to develop the policy not only to protect those people's privacy, but and do it correctly.
I want to congratulate the audience. You guys are asking questions. I went to a seminar 2 weeks ago, and these questions were all brought up at the seminar, so I think you guys are hitting the hot topics. On the seminar that we had a professor from South Carolina School of Law, and he actually showed us different scenarios with different cameras, 2 or 3 different cameras, and if you looked at each different camera, you had a different perception of what happened in that case. And wow. So you look at one camera, you thought one thing, then you looked at another one, you thought another. And so it's very important to get a full look of everything. And it's a tough issue.
It may have been South Carolina. One of the states passed a law making body cameras mandatory for all police departments, yet also said that they weren't public records, so they weren't releasable at all.
Well, and then you have New Jersey that said that they were not going to do body cameras anymore because they didn't have the money to store the film.
Several departments have already gotten rid of them because of that.
Because they can't afford to keep them.
This person is looking for the data, either countywide or in the municipalities, regarding arrests, prosecutions, and dispositions or sentencings by race, to see if there is a disproportionate, I'll get the word out in a moment, number of any race compared to the makeup of the county. Any findings in the data that you keep at the county level or at the city level, the municipality level?
I'm not aware of any data such as that that's kept at the county level. I would venture to guess that if that's ever done, it's going to be done either at the Attorney General level of the state of Ohio, but more likely the United States. I mean, that would be a big project to take on, but I'm not aware of any data of that nature that's kept at the county level.
Our municipal court clerk of courts keeps statistics, and I believe yearly she issues a report, but I believe that it primarily is just looking at the differences between how many felonies and how many misdemeanors come and what those types of offenses are, whether they're DUIs or minor misdemeanor traffic violations, and looks at it that way.
Our records management system can draw up that information when we need it. It can do it by citations and arrests. And we've done it in the past when we've had complaints.
Just to add one thing, Reverend, the issue as to whether people are being treated fairly, whether people similarly situated are being treated consistently. Chuck mentioned something earlier that no two cases are alike. And while a lot of similar themes, particularly drugs, run through a lot of the criminal cases, you're not going to find, at least I haven't found yet, any two defendants who are exactly alike so that I could say person A was exactly like person B and one was treated different than the other. So it's a popular phrase that is used, but the reason these pre-sentence reports are prepared and these backgrounds are delved into so extensively, and I spend probably upwards of an hour at a sentencing, is because none of the individuals who come before me are exactly alike.
A question for sentencing judge. What percentage of convicted felons suffer from some form of mental illness? And the second part of that is percentage of convicted felons have addiction problems, your estimation or data?
Well, that's a doozy, because you're going to see, at least I see, some form of a mental diagnosis in a lot of cases. And again, it's on a scale. Some will be schizophrenic, and some will be suffer from anxiety. And there's a whole world of difference between the two. But I would say probably either self-reported or diagnosed. I would guess around 40% have some form of mild, anywhere up to severe diagnosis. As far as the drugs, I would venture a guess that in one form or another, probably 90% of the criminal cases involve drugs of some form.
In a municipal level, I think that's pretty accurate also. I always say that alcohol and drugs will make you do things you would never do. It doesn't allow you to do things you should be doing. Many times alcohol, I'd say 80-90% is involved in these crimes.
But there are people that slip through this system every single day. I mean, somebody could not say anything to their attorney, and their attorney never present that they might have a mental health problem. And, life just passes by and they get sentenced and nobody knows the wiser of it. So I'm fortunate enough in Mentor that when a police officer sees something that they think is out of the ordinary or might be attributable to a mental health problem, or oftentimes, after an arrest when they're speaking or interviewing the defendant, they'll end up having conversations about their drug usage and whether or not somebody's been addicted to heroin, and some of the information comes out, and they're always very good about making sure that information is contained in the police reports, or someone will even stop by my office and say, hey, can I talk to you about this incident that happened last week, and I arrested this person, there was just something off, and here's the stuff I was seeing. So we're lucky enough that even where it's not evident, people are still trying to make sure that we're aware of it so that it makes its way, into the mental health court, or that those people are getting the services that they need. And we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we see those cases and people aren't falling through the cracks.
We're very fortunate too in Lake County because we've been on a proactive scale of trying to get our police officers trained so they see these things. Many times in these tragic situations that we have seen lately, a person might have a mental illness and things are undetected. And we have a special person here, Julie Hammond. She's my program director. She's here. Hi, Julie. And she taught that, she teaches that program. It's called a CIT program, so that our officers are trained to look for things like that. And they do handle the case differently and better. And we're so fortunate that we've been doing this for years now. We're way ahead of the schedule. We're proactive. I think that's important.
Speaking of kids, earlier there was a comment about the full disclosure during discovery. This person thought that the juvenile records were sealed. How do you handle if a juvenile is the offender?
We do treat juveniles a little differently, but not for discovery purposes. The defense counsel still gets total open discovery. So even in a juvenile case, the full police report is given to defense counsel. So they know, so the juvenile delinquent, we don't call them criminals in Ohio. If you're under 18, they're delinquents. So the delinquent's lawyer will have every report, every witness statement, full open discovery. Now, when I say open discovery, that's discovery going to the defense counsel. It's not discovery we're posting on public for other people to read at that point, just to defense counsel. In fact, there is a procedure where some things are so sensitive, we will say that it's for counsel only, that defense counsel can look at it, but he can't show it to his client because his client may use that against, for instance, a witness or something, retaliation. We don't want that to happen.
The juvenile court is also pretty mindful about, it's not a public courtroom per se where somebody who's unrelated to the case can just walk in and kind of sit down and watch and take notes. And generally speaking, it's not public record for the rest of the world. So an employer can't really go nosing through juvenile court records to see if somebody has a juvenile record. And there is also a procedure like an expungement or a sealing procedure that's available in the juvenile court to make sure that those records are sealed as well.
Just a question about police training in accordance with race relations. Is there any particular programs or anything like that that's offered when it comes to race relations and training? Police training.
Repeat the question.
What kind of training are the police getting in accordance with race relations?
In the courts or in police training?
What kind of training are the police getting in accordance with race relations?
In accordance. But there's that diversity training goes on, and that's been brought in for years. And I'm not sure what the entire curriculum in police academies are right now. But as far as one of the things, the crisis intervention training that we do, which includes de-escalation training, and we work at getting as many of our officers through that program as we can, as often as the program is put on.
We have just under 30 minutes for the formal question Q&A session to go. But afterwards, once we reach the time, if you still want to ask questions, the panel members will still be available.
My name's Alice Hinkle, and I've learned a great deal tonight about the judicial system. And I had a very wonderful experience as a juror a couple of years ago in the Lake County case. The last question more or less addressed the question I was about to ask. Given that I've learned a lot about the judicial system, I haven't, until that question, really heard a lot about the conversation about race in the judicial system. And so I was wondering, I'm glad to hear about the diversity training, but would there be anything that any of the panelists would add as to how these two topics relate?
Very good question. That same seminar I went to, we talked about Brown versus Education, the 1954 case, and what that meant. There also was another seminar as to Arab Americans and Muslims and issues with them and the way they wear clothes and things like that. Because a lot of times when you come in a courtroom, they say, take your hat off for this or that, that kind of thing. And there might be a religious reason why a person does it. So I just want you to know that in our seminars with the judges, they are being very, they want us to be aware of different cultures and what happens. So I think they're training us to take a look at these things.
And just so you know that any new judge that's appointed or elected has to go through a two-part seminar as soon as they get in. I think it's within the first 6 months it's completed. And one of the courses one of the seminars they put on is Judge Adrien, who's been Cleveland Municipal Court for I think about 30 years. So he and another judge from, I believe it's a Court of Appeals judge from Hamilton County, focus on that aspect of things and try to make you, as a judge, aware of any possible inherent bias you may have. It's just something that gets you thinking. So they do stress that to all the new judges who come in.
This question has a little bit of data before the question is asked. It says black men receive sentences 20% longer than white men for similar crimes, and blacks are arrested for drug offenses 3 times the rate of whites despite the same rate of use. What actions have been taken to ensure that policing and judicial practices in Lake County are bias-free?
I can tell you from what I do in my perspective. I don't know where the stats come from. I don't know whether the stats are accurate or inaccurate. As I said at the beginning, that what we have focused on this committee is the system in Lake County.
Yeah, I've been told they are FBI statistics, but your inputs.
Now I don't know what statistics the FBI drew out of Lake County. As I said, as the members of this committee can attest to, as I've said time and time again, we control what we control. And we, as in my position as a judge in Lake County, somebody comes before me, it doesn't matter what they are, what they look like. It matters what they did, how they should be punished, what their background indicates, and what's the best situation, what's the best outcome for that particular case. So I don't know how to answer your question because I can't, what the FBI come up with, and I don't know where it comes from. All I can tell you is what I do on a daily basis and what the other 3 general division judges do on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter to me if they're black, white, or otherwise. I look at every case, and as I told the Reverend earlier, no 2 cases are alike, and they're going to be treated fairly regardless of what they look like or what their background is. Because my obligation is to impose a fair sentence. If that fair sentence means, because of the circumstances of that defendant, that they go to prison for 10 years, then that's required. If the circumstances are such that we're committing repeated crimes because they're a heroin addict and can't get off it, and if there's something I can do to try to break that cycle, then that's what I do.
Another question. This person asked, how are the local municipalities or the county going about diversifying their staff? Officers, prosecutors, public defenders, judges, etc.
I'll go first. In the prosecutor's office. In order to be a prosecutor, obviously you have to have a law degree. And so the pool that we can select from in hiring are lawyers. You have to be licensed in the state of Ohio. I get very few applicants from minorities in Lake County. I'm going to try to give you an accurate count. I'm going from memory here, but if I'm off, I'm only off by 1 or 2. I have had 4, and no, only 3. 3 people of a minority, 3 minorities in my office who have been hired as lawyers. out the secretaries and law clerks now because there have been some of those too. I'm focusing on the lawyers for the moment. And in fact, I went out trying to recruit a young minority, a young African-American woman, just took her to lunch about 2 months ago. And because I'd heard she wanted to be a prosecutor, I'd heard good reports about her, that she was a good, competent lawyer, and took her to lunch, and I offered her a job. And I told her what the county pays, $46,000, and she looked at me and says, "I'm making $70,000 already. I don't want your job." So not only is the pool small, the pay is also small, and so it's tough to get prosecutors. I went out and I hired. I've had a couple of law clerks. One of them, who was a young African American, I hired him after he passed the bar, but he couldn't take the low pay. In fact, he was working for me as assistant prosecutor in order to get enough money, because he wanted to get married to another assistant prosecutor who was also an African-American woman working for me in the television. He had to go out and work in, it was Higbee's or Dillard's at the time, on weekends and evenings to supplement his income so he could ask her to marry him, because the county wasn't paying him enough money as a young assistant prosecutor. So we've got a double whammy when we're trying to go out and recruit people in the prosecutor's office for that. There's only, and I haven't had a single Hispanic attorney that I'm aware of that has even sent an application in. So that's the difficulty we face, even when we go out to try to recruit.
Yeah, as far as we go, we're civil service, so it's a civil service process by an independent commission, but we did do as much as we can to get the idea out there and the information out there. We actually did a recruiting video this time. I just gave a test beginning of August, and had over 200 people sign up to take the test. There was a significant amount of both females and African Americans who took the test. I have a list. I don't know what race they are because my list doesn't tell me that. But we go out as far as we can. We push it out in the media. I know I was talking to a young African American man at our testing site. He came from Toledo to take the test. And I put it out to all the colleges. Anybody has criminal justice programs. It was on Begin the Conversations Facebook page, in every place we could think of. We used to post it in the Colin Post in Cleveland, but that really didn't raise the amount of applicants we got at all. I think you have to look at your demographics of who you're looking at, and the age of people we were looking for don't read the newspaper. Face it, they're doing everything. So we pushed it out digitally, social media as best we could, as far as wide of an area as we can. Just a note on that, though, is that people can make themselves more marketable because a lot of places want you to have the police academy already. And I don't know, Ron, are you still here? Chief Morenz from Lakeland is here. He just raised his hand, and he actually has application packets, if you know anybody who may be interested, as they have an open academy coming up in March. So the best you can do is you got to kind of get yourself ready for these positions too. If you do have some minor arrests, get those expunged. Stay out of trouble, stay off the drugs.
What is the difference between having a public defender and a paid attorney in sentencing?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Ditto.
Thank you.
I want to jump in as a prosecutor a little bit, because I think in Lake County we have some really outstanding public defenders, and who are some very competent trial lawyers. And so don't sell the public defenders in Lake County short. I know there's this feeling out there sometimes, if you get a public defender, you don't have a good lawyer. That just isn't necessarily the case at all.
I can state that too for myself. I, like the judge, started off as a public defender and then became a prosecutor. And I can say that I feel like I work pretty closely with the two public defenders that work out of Mentor Municipal Court. And part of it is getting to know the prosecutor's thoughts and positions and the judge's thoughts and positions, and knowing ahead of time what to tell their clients to go and do that they know the judge is going to be looking for down the road. So sometimes the public defender's office are probably the more competent defense attorneys that come before at least the municipal courts, because they know what everybody's looking for, and we know each other so well from having to deal with each other many cases every single week. So I think our public defenders are great in this county.
And you have to realize too that that's all they do. They study the criminal law, that's what they do. They do know the courts, they do know the procedures. And many times the attorney that you're paying, he might also do, or she might also do criminal or domestic work, and they might be diluted a little bit. Where the public defender, that's all they do. And frankly, they're one of the top 3 to 5 attorneys in the county. Final.
Thank you. In respect to the time we have remaining, I'm going to ask the panel, one person to answer, if you can. Here's the question. This may go, well, I'm not sure where it goes to. Can you call a licensed driver to come and get your vehicle in order to keep it from being towed away?
We do allow that for some things, like a first-time DUI or something, as long as it doesn't take an inordinate amount of time, as long as they can be there in 15, 20 minutes, we allow it.
With that being said, there are certain cases that you must mobilize the vehicle by law. That's by statute, and the police don't have an option, and neither does the court.
And sometimes the car may be looked at as evidence, and the police department may be mobilizing it for that reason as well.
A legal question. While you're working on the legal side of issues, do the legal offices offer help to victims, their families, and even the families of those people that have committed or been accused of a crime? Is there any kind of assistance offered through the legal offices?
There is, through the state of Ohio, I don't know if this answers this question or not, but something called the Victims of Crime Compensation Fund. And that is a fund that's available. There's an application. They're all over the lobbies in most of the municipal courts. All of the victims advocates have them. So sometimes a victim will have medical expenses that they're never going to collect their medical expenses or their time off of work and some of these other things. So the state of Ohio has this fund available. With the application process, a person might be approved to have some of those costs reimbursed.
Most of the municipalities have victims advocates as well as the county. We have one, and Willoughby has one, Eastlake has one. And so there's victims advocates on the municipal level too, not just on the county level.
Judges, you both talked about rehabilitation. Once time has been served, why is one still being judged in that society still holds it against the individual, making it even harder for them to become employed?
That's an issue which has gone, I think it's swinging back toward allowing individuals, particularly those convicted of felonies, back into gainful employment. There's something started about a year or so ago called a certificate of qualification for employment that an individual, most likely if they're having trouble getting a job, can come in, can file that request with the clerk of courts at the county, and that will be assigned to one of the judges, and the judge will take a look at that individual, take a look at that individual's background, and then sign the certificate that says they are qualified for employment, which then can be presented to employers.
And Lake County has been very proactive in this. Julie, I think you were on that committee with me about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even longer, that we look at working with the prison system when a person's coming back to hook them up with different county agencies where we can try to help them and get them reoriented back into society.
Can counties and cities add funding to supplement what comes out of Columbus for public defenders?
Well, they do. There is money allocated by the county commissioners, because not all that money comes back from the state of Ohio. A certain percentage of it does. The percentage off the top of my head escapes me, but the county commissioners do fund that shortfall.
Another thing too, and I'm glad we have this forum, people say, man, those court costs, why are those judges putting those court costs on us? I just want you to know something. On an OVI case, operating a vehicle under the influence, there's about 14 different ways that the money goes out, and not a lot of it goes to the court. There's different indigent funds for different things that they have for the scram units and other things that are paid for people that cannot afford it. And those are very important because what it does is allows the judge to allow somebody to continue to work in that, but it gives us that safety net. If you have a fellow or gal that has an OVI, so that you can have that safety net so that we can watch them and monitor them, make sure they're not drinking and driving. There's also the interlock system and things like that we employ as another safety net to make sure that somebody doesn't hurt somebody in society. So those costs, the legislators have put that on to court costs, and so that happens also.
Just to piggyback off of that answer, just a last question here. Are people in Lake County, are they charged any fees while they're in jail or kept in jail if they can't pay fees?
At the county level, from the county courts, they are not, and they cannot be charged. A lot of times the court costs on felony cases, by and large, go uncollected, because the most that can happen if somebody doesn't pay their court costs or their probation supervision fees, there can be a judgment issue, but they cannot be held because they have not paid.
I can only speak for Mentor court jurisdiction, we do not collect them.
And I do think our court works with people as much as they possibly can. I mean, I've seen countless cases where the judge has, upon hearing the circumstances of the person, maybe they're not getting child support, or they lost their job, or they have some kind of an injury. He goes out of his way to suspend fines and court costs pretty frequently. And under circumstances where maybe it's not appropriate to do that, he gives them the opportunity to do community service through fines and court costs. So there's ways for them to kind of work it off as well.
Chief Knight, this is addressed to you. Is it legal, two-part question, is it legal during a traffic stop to request the license of the passengers? Part two, and is it legal to ask the driver if the passenger or passengers are illegal aliens?
The first part was asking for occupants' driver's licenses.
Yes.
As I mentioned before, if a front passenger, you can ask, in an instance where he doesn't have a seatbelt on, because by law he has to have a seatbelt, so you'd have to have identification for the citation purposes. Unless the other occupants are suspected of a crime, they don't have to identify themselves. And as far as immigration status, we don't do that. We're only checking immigration status of somebody that we have in physical custody arrest.
Maybe we'll wrap it up with this final question, and I know the panelists will be here afterward to take any further questions if they haven't been asked. How many inmates are in the Lake County jail system at any given time on average?
Captain,
The answer will come right here.
I think.
Usually on a daily basis, we have between 380 and 400 inmates. The jail can house 411, according to the state. However, over the summer, we did hit a population of 450.
Well, thank you, panel, for taking the questions. Just give a round of applause for our panelists. Keep it going.
first thing, I'd like to thank Judge Trevette and thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it, absolutely. Now, all the members of the Begin the Conversation Forum, would you please stand and identify yourself?
Kevin Malachek, Lake County Commissioner.
Joab P. Moded.
Judy Moran, Lake County Commissioner.
Anthony Pauly, Chief of Police for Paynesville.
Kenneth Hall, pastor and retired state trooper.
Reverend Dr. Melvin Molly, Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church.
Dana Flater, bilingual therapist at Catholic Charities.
Michael Laser, Wilwick Police Chief.
Marvin Walker, pastor at St. John Baptist Church in Paynesville, Ohio.
Pastor Mike Wanqua, Calvary CME Church.
Cynthia Brooks, Lake County Sheriff's Office, Jail Administrator.
Scott Kennedy, Parkside Church, Lake County lead pastor.
John O'Donnell, Lake County Common Pleas Judge. Chuck Olson, Lake County Prosecutor.
John Trevitz, Municipal Court.
Kevin Knight, City of Garner Police Chief. Now, I have to say we've been meeting 14 or 15 months on a regular basis concerning about the criminal justice center system and race. Now, I wish the public could get a real view of the dedication of the people in the criminal justice center, the dedication, and that they are truly committed to fair and impartiality. Absolutely, truly committed to it. And one of the biggest things is that I'm sure all of you realize the fact, know about the Charleston, South Carolina shooting. Miss Jackson, the oldest lady that was killed, her son was in the Army here in Paynesville with me. We're still friends. He lives in Cleveland. Okay. Every time I went to Charleston, I ate in her home. So shootings is a real thing with me. I've seen it. It hurts for it to happen. But also, the most important thing is that in Lake County, we haven't had one. But the purpose behind Begin the Conversation is that we'll be able to get the information out and get the trust of the people in case something would happen, that by the time people come in town with their own private agenda, okay, it would not end up just totally destroying our lives, absolutely, totally. And the purpose behind it is to get, for the people to understand, for all of us to understand, justice is for all. Absolutely, justice is for all. And the one thing I would ask all of us is to get involved with some form of making life better, absolutely. Whether or not you get involved with this portion, okay, employment, education, housing, there's a lot of things that will make life better for all of us. Okay. So, and I appreciate all of you coming out tonight. And any formerly incarcerated person, they can vote, but they have to be registered by October 10th? October 11th. Okay. If you've been incarcerated, if you know somebody that's been incarcerated, they can vote, but they got to register and be registered by October the 11th. Okay. And we just want to thank everybody for coming out. And I think this dedicated set of people who's working here in this county, and a lot we've been able to get to know, because we didn't know the judges. I didn't know the people, and I voted for them. I didn't know them. But now I have a full appreciation on how dedicated these people are. I have a full appreciation of how dedicated the prosecutor is. He's my neighbor, so we've been knowing each other for a long, long time. But Mr. Colson is a dedicated person to justice, absolutely, totally. And I wish that we would, some of the best sermons, as we have a lot of pastors in here, are preached to empty pews, okay? So with that, I thank you all, and remember, Brother Pastor Coffee.
A couple of housekeeping things that we'd like to do before we dismiss with prayer. We want to remind you that there are several handouts in the foyer we want you to go home with. One is I wish to be involved handout with several different bullet points that you can pick if you would like to be involved further into the discussion that's going on. There are several mini forums that are being planned so that there will be a more intimate opportunity. There's one being planned there's one in place on Tuesday, October the 4th at St. Noel's Church, 35200 Chardon Road, Willoughby, Ohio. There's one being held Thursday, October the 6th, that same week, at the Union Community Church where we serve as shepherd, 10959 Johnny Cake Ridge Road. And there's one held on Wednesday, November 16th, 2016 at Elm Street School, 585 Elm Street in Painesville, Ohio. I would be remiss to say that these are specifically planned and picked for those people of certain cultures. So the one at Union, everybody's welcome, but it's specifically going to deal with some African-American issues. The one at Elm Street, specifically going to deal with some Latino, Spanish-speaking issues. And the one at St. Noel's will specifically deal with the larger community. So we want to let you know that the conversation is continuing. In fact, I would really like to go a step farther before I pray and talk about the purpose of Begin the Conversation. And the purpose, mission and purpose statement says, the purpose of Begin the Conversation is to have an open and honest conversation regarding race and justice in our community, to lay the groundwork regarding our community's commitment to peace, cooperation, accountability, and equality, and to build a relationship of trust between the citizens of Lake County and community leaders. And we hope that this has advanced that agenda on tonight. We look forward to seeing you in these individual meetings, and we're going to stand now. If there's nothing else that we need to deal with, we're going to stand now. And there has been a suggestion by one of our police chiefs, and I hope that you will do this for us, but I hope you would gather close enough that you can reach out and touch the person's hand and grab it next to you. Would you do that for us? If I could sing, I would give you a good rendition of that, but I'll spare you the trauma. Amen. Let's bow our heads. Lord, we honor your presence tonight, and we thank you for this privilege to be able to begin a conversation about race, and we ask, and the judicial system, and we ask that we would leave here. We know that some didn't get to the mics, and we know that some didn't write their opinions down, but we ask that, dear God, you would give them the courage not to hold or sit on those thoughts, but that they would share them openly so that we can dialogue about them, and then hopefully, dear God, it will bring a sense of unity, and respect, and trust on every side of the aisle, those who are sitting in the position of making decisions, and those of us who are following those decisions. We ask that we would be able to reach across those aisles and connect in a way that we can be a model community for this nation in terms of race relations, dear God. Help us not to be afraid of the tough discussions, but in the same sense, dear God, help us to move forward in community. We honor you today. We praise you. We thank you for the privilege. In Jesus' name, we do ask it all. And the people of God said, amen. Amen. God bless you. Again, the panelists will be around here and in the foyer for you to chat with them if you like.